Hey, and welcome to Wrestling and. Thank you so much for joining us, guys. Today, we are going to talk about wrestling and Vince McMahon. Yes, Vince McMahon. Vince retired a few days ago amid multiple allegations of hush money payments to former lovers that he's had. And we always knew that the day would come where Vince left. We weren't sure if he was, not to be morbid here, but if it was going to be when he died or if he retired. But we definitely didn't think it would come this soon and out of nowhere. So we're going to talk about Vince. We're going to talk about his life and who he was and some of his performances as a wrestler. He's an icon and, you could call him a legend among legends in the pro wrestling business. And very polarizing figure, but love him or hate him, Vince McMahon is one of, if not the most important people in the history of wrestling business. So before we get to that, though, let's say hi to Mr. Justin in Ring Art. Justin, did you watch Death Before Dishonor?
No, did not. I want to check it out. Maybe I'll check it out tomorrow. Was out and about today and yesterday. Okay. Was at Universal with the kids. Universal with some friends from out of town.
Oh yeah, you went to Universal. What's the best ride at Universal?
We went on the Simpsons ride for the first time because every time we go, it's insanely packed and 70, 80. We went on it twice today. Yesterday.
Is it true that the Simpsons ride is an upgrade from the Back to the Future ride?
I think so. I never went on the Back to the Future ride.
It was fun. I went on it in Florida. It was awesome. I mean,
I think they still have it there. You start in a room and then your car kind of goes up, right?
In the Back to the Future one, you're in a car and then there's the screen in front and you think you're cruising through all this stuff.
A lot of their rides are like that, but the best ride is probably the Harry Potter ride that they have.
Is it a coaster or?
It's kind of a mix between the screen. You get in and your feet are dangling and you're flying with them on a broom. That's pretty awesome, fun. Actually.
Sounds a little bit like the E.T. one from back in the day where you're in the bicycle.
It might be the old area where it was. I don't know. Something like that.
Yeah, they just upgrade them. Man, I really want to hit some good coasters. I am too fat right now, actually, to ride. I didn't even know that was a thing. I'm not the size of Fluffy from, Iglesias. But, no, if you're a certain weight, you can't even buckle the thing, you know what I mean? So I had to lose some weight to. You can ride. I can ride the wooden coasters; those are fine. But the ones where your feet dangle,
right?
Yeah. So I need to get on that. Death Before Dishonor. Not much to say about it. I didn't watch it either, Justin. But I did watch the first match, which was the World Championship match, and it was weird. There were technical issues.
That was the first match?
Yeah, that was the opener. Yeah.
They opened with the world title match?
Well, you got to understand the main event, dude. It's FTR versus the Briscoes tag team.
That was the main event. Okay. Well,
I think it's awesome that the tag team wrestling is that renowned where that's the main event. I've always wanted that and so supposedly that match was even better than their last one, which was fucking amazing. So I'm going to say this is a must-watch match. Your boy Dalton Castle won a championship tonight.
Oh, yeah, cool. I like Dalton Castle.
He won the trios title with the boys.
Oh, very cool. Was it against Bateman and those guys, the Stray Dog Army or something?
I don't even know, dude. Some group of people.
Right.
There's a lot of wrestlers I don't even know who they are in Ring of Honor, but I've heard they had some people from the early 2000s come back. Jay Lethal lost to Samoa Joe. You had Serena
Jay's
Deeb.
tuning up for his match next week, right?
I suppose. Who's he wrestling next week?
Ric Flair. And,
Jay Lethal.
He's in that tag match.
I thought we were talking about Samoa Joe. Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said Jay Lethal lost too.
Yeah, he did. He lost to Samoa Joe.
Right.
Okay, so, another thing that you're gonna might have to check out, and I missed it last night, but I really want to watch it, was the Stardom show from last night. Did you hear anything about it?
No.
No?
Not a peep. No, I haven't heard.
It's all gimmick matches.
Okay, so it's Extreme Rules?
Yeah. They did a hardcore match. They did a coffin match. They did a bikini match. They did a what else did they do? They had like all sorts of stuff. Every match had a gimmick. They did like a rumble or a battle royale, and I heard it was really entertaining. So
sounds like it.
Isn't that a cool idea?
Think of it. Sure. Well, it's called Extreme Rules. I mean, it's been done, but I mean, for something for like
Japan,
Stardom to do it sounds cool. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's very unique. Different. Very unique. So definitely gonna have to check that out. And come on, let's be honest here. Extreme Rules, dude. Nowadays they have like one hardcore match on the show.
TLC.
Yeah, even dude, I think they did a TLC match where there was no ladder match on it before. I'm pretty sure that's happened.
I wouldn't be surprised. It was called
So, yeah. Anyways, real quick, Justin, let's get into the meat of this here. Vince McMahon,
Kennedy McMahon.
Everyone knows who he is, and if you don't, he is. It's hard to just describe him in one sentence, but I'll put it this way: he is the brains and number one leader and head of WWF and WWE, and has been for about 40 years, and is often credited with a lot of the big booms periods in wrestling in the 80s and in the Attitude Era. Of course, the wrestlers, they matter a lot, no discounting them, but this was the guy that was putting them in their positions, hiring them, and making those decisions. And recently, there was the scandal. Justin, why don't you talk about that real quick? Just, don't just spend too long on it.
I mean, I'm not really surprised by any of it. I think people kind of knew that, there was some kind of side to him like that. I don't think anyone was really surprised that this kind of stuff was coming out.
Yeah. Which is that he was basically having affairs and then paying women not to talk about it. Not illegal.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anyone was surprised by that stuff coming out. No, I don't know. Vince McMahon's one of those guys where he is responsible for some of professional wrestling, sports entertainment, whatever you want to call it, the greatest achievements he was behind, and also some of the biggest lows he's been behind, and the biggest, downsides to it, and bad things. He's so, what's the word I'm looking for? Polarizing, right?
He is very polarizing, yeah. I mean...
So he's everywhere, terms of it.
With wrestlers, with fans, with media... He's always been really polarizing. You have some wrestlers that'll come out and say, he's the best guy in the world, like Mark Calloway. Right. And then you have guys that are like, fuck that asshole, people more like Bret Hart, right?
And you equally believe both of them. You know what I mean? Like, it's just really depends on at what time you met him and at what time and what he thought of you. It's just, like I said, it's like, I believe both of them.
Yeah, and he is a character, dude. This guy is extremely unique as an individual. His personality, the way he carries himself, and the way he runs business. There's really nobody like him that I've ever heard of.
No.
So, I mean, it's very interesting what happened recently. Like you said, it's not a huge surprise, but after, the Me Too movement and all that stuff, this kind of behavior is really hugely frowned upon, even though it was not illegal. I guess we'll find out a little bit more of that later. It really depends on where the money was coming from. I know a lot of it is being said to be his own money, but it's also the construction of these NDAs, how legal they were, and where the money was actually coming from. Yes, because it is a public company, and that's
a public company. Yeah,
that's I think what is the heart of this matter, and the reason that it was reported in the Wall Street Journal is, in a way, it's kind of considered business news because this publicly traded company, you have shares in the company, right? You want to know what's going on in the company, and come to find out that this happened with the company that you are investing in. There's gonna be some issues there.
I mean, there's definitely a morality aspect of it where if you're the head of a company and you're paying women to be quiet about your, relationships. It's not. I guess that's not really a good look for a publicly traded company when the CEO is doing stuff like that. I guess.
Yeah.
It's just funny. I just was, talking maybe to you in the text, but like I was talking with my buddy Will, who we went to Universal with from New York. I used to do the podcast with him, and we were, I was just telling him, like, I think it seems that people that are to this extreme level of just like involvement in what they do, and the high up people like this, their falls usually come hard and sudden. The people that you don't think are ever going to stop often stop suddenly and out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And I think just this fits the mold here. I mean, in a way, I still don't believe it. I still feel like he's going to be on the phone making creative phone calls and all that stuff. And there's going to be no way that this guy can put it down.
What's he going to do in his spare time, Justin? Is he going to sit at home and watch TV? Fuck no.
First of all, it's going to be...
He's been working for 50 years straight with barely a break.
And that was he needs that purpose in his life, I have a feeling.
Yeah.
And unless somebody can send him a copy of Fire Pro real stat so he can start booking that.
I'd love to see Vince become a Twitch streamer and just get hardcore. And he's like, this is my favorite character.
Conrad, I'm sure, is, chomping at the bit to get him to have a podcast. Could you imagine that? That might be the most downloaded podcast ever if Vince McMahon gets one. Forget it.
I have a feeling that Vince...
Forget, not even wrestling, like all time, anything.
Vince is going to be a WWE guy till the day he dies, man. And I have a feeling he will follow a lot of the same rules and structure that he's been doing for the last 40 years. I mean, but
he's not going to take Linda and go on a long holiday. We know that.
No. They supposedly don't even live together. And
they haven't for years, allegedly.
Yeah. So before talking about the future, let's jump to the past here. His birthday's coming up, actually. In 1 month. He was born on August 24th, 1945. In Pinehurst, North Carolina. So this is a interesting thing. We've heard the stories that he grew up in a trailer park, right?
Yeah, to a single mother.
And you often hear about the relationship he had with his father. For those that don't know, his dad was also Vincent McMahon, and his dad ran the CWC. A lot of people say, "Oh, the WWF." No, CWC was like the business that owned and governed WWF. And his dad, but he didn't even meet his dad till he was 12.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine? I mean, I know we're going to talk about some things with Vince and some parenting issues, but this is a guy who was basically raised by a single mother, and I believe he has siblings as well.
Stepfather at times.
Yeah, and he didn't have the most ideal upbringing, and then he had this dad that was, relatively somewhat famous in a way, and didn't really come into his life until he, hit those pubescent years.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting there. And in fact, when he was growing up, he wasn't called Vince McMahon. He was, his name was Vinnie Lupton. So he had multiple stepfathers, by the way, but is Vinnie Lupton, single mother with some stepfathers here and there, and just growing up. Now, after he met his dad, he did get interested, and why wouldn't you be, right? Like, you're living in a trailer park, and then your dad is doing all this badass shit at Madison Square Garden. Of course, you're gonna want to gravitate towards the dad, right? So he followed in. He wanted to follow in the footsteps and started going to Madison Square Garden, and actually he wanted to be a wrestler. Did you know that?
Doesn't surprise me, and I think I have heard that before, but if you've ever seen Vince McMahon, and you have the idea that he might have wanted to do that.
I feel like his dream did kind of come true, though. Actually, it did come true. It really did come true. He did become a performer and a wrestler. But his dad actually would not let him, because back then the idea was that promoters, they are not on the show. Promoters are backstage and should be separate from the wrestlers, and the promoter is a backstage, like a business entity. So that's why his dad was like, nah, if we're doing promotion, we're not going to do wrestling. So that line was very demarcated back then. You know what I mean? There wasn't. It's not like it was today, where even Tony Khan like doesn't appear on Dynamite, but he's doing press conferences after every show. Very different back in the day.
Or he comes out there with kind of screaming and yelling. But yeah, no, we probably wouldn't even know who they were. I mean, it was really like that until, I mean, it's probably the late 70s, right?
Yeah, 80 is late 70s, 80s, and it's a lot like boxing, right? Like even a little different now because boxing promoters are often like have become celebrities, like Don King. But I mean, if I told you about the Professional Fight League, the PFL, and asked you who's the promoter of that, it's like, I don't know. That's not a figure that appears on screen. That's a business person in the background.
Yeah, well, now you have guys like Dana White, and
it's kind of changed, right?
Yeah, it has. I think
even in other businesses like Elon Musk, you have the CEO celebrity thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's a face to everything.
Yeah. But, back in the day, I think the thought was like, I'm not here to be a celebrity. I'm here to run a business type of thing. So McMahon did go to, I think, a military high school, and he did graduate from East Carolina University with a business degree. He actually tried to be a traveling salesman for a little bit. I would love to see a young Vince selling Bibles.
Or vacuum cleaners.
Yeah, vacuum cleaners. Just, I don't know if he had his rough voice back then. In fact, I'm pretty sure he did.
It's gonna suck.
Oh, I would love that. But he really, he wanted to get into the WWF. WWWF. Or the CW.
Worldwide.
Yeah, worldwide. And he actually he did get into it. And in 1969, McMahon started as an in-ring announcer for All-Star Wrestling, which was a WWF show. That's hard to say. We're so used to saying WWF, right?
Yeah. Well, now E, I guess.
Get the F out. In 1971, Vince was assigned to a small territory in Maine, and he started promoting, and he did his first card there. And he started doing the play-by-play commentator for his matches, which he did until 1997, Justin. And our childhood is filled with Vince McMahon's voice.
1, 2. We didn't get it. Yes,
yeah.
That. What a maneuver, yeah.
I like when he would do the, and I think it's over. No! He would just do the whole, giving up on the match, and then, no, it's not there. But you go and watch WWF from back in the 80s, 90s, you're going to hear Vince. And he was a good announcer, too. So what do you think as Vince McMahon as an announcer? Did you like him?
He was fine, I guess. I mean, he had a good cadence and a good voice, and I think he played well with the color commentators. Whether
he
it
was kind of like the
Jesse the
guy.
Body. Yeah, Jesse the Body.
Bobby Heenan,
the King.
Yeah.
Jim Ross. He worked with all those guys. You could tell that as wrestling was changing in that 90s era, that it was time to turn it over to somebody else.
Well,
and I know that
he started becoming an on-screen character.
Yeah, and I think at the same time he's been trying to get people to take his place since the late 80s when they hired Tony Schiavone for that 1 year and stuff like that.
Did they?
I think, yeah. Yeah, Tony Schiavone worked for WWF at the time in 1989.
I didn't know that.
And I believe he called the 1989 Royal Rumble.
I know that Jim Ross called the WrestleMania in Caesar's Palace with one of the worst Undertaker matches of all time.
Or it's the worst WrestleMania of all time, really.
Is it considered?
In my opinion. I mean, Hogan comes out of nowhere and beats Yokozuna at the end.
Dude,
after the Bret Hart wins the title.
The Undertaker match was so
Was that Giant
bad.
Gonzalez?
Yeah.
Well, that was more Giant Gonzalez was awful.
And the Undertaker back then wasn't that great either. They wanted him to be really slow and just do those uppercut strikes, neck palm strikes he did. And
Yeah.
anyways, that all changed. He definitely wasn't doing over the top conhilos, you know what I mean? But
Right.
yeah, so as far as McMahon goes, he started that announcing in 1971, and this is where McMahon's intelligence and his personality comes into play, because over the course of the 70s, he actually rose his way up the ranks. Now, there's a little nepotism there, right? It helps that your dad is doing that stuff, but he worked his way up, and he started assisting his dad in TV syndication, and in fact, he tripled their TV syndication. So some pretty successful stuff there. He pushed for the renaming of the company, right? Probably because there was too many W's, do you think?
Or he just wanted to go toe-to-toe with the World Wildlife Federation, and which finally caught up with him in 2000 and whatever.
Yeah, that is very possible that he didn't like panda bears in the 80s.
Or,
So
hated animals.
Yeah. This is interesting that I didn't know. Vince was also behind the Muhammad Ali versus Antonio Inoki match.
I think I knew he had some level of involvement in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's interesting.
Which we could do a whole show on that. But for those that don't know, there was kind of an early mixed martial arts match. It was a total sham in that the rules made the match extremely not entertaining. With Inoki trying to pull guard, laying on his back, and doing up kicks like the whole match.
Yeah, didn't he kick the crap out of
yeah,
Muhammad
his
Ali's
legs.
shins the whole time, and it took Muhammad Ali a long time to recover from that.
Yeah,
I think it hurt him the rest of his career.
Probably. It's kind of sad, but it was considered extremely not entertaining. I think they had a closed circuit at Shea Stadium back in the day. So we'll talk about that some other time, though. In 1979, Vince and his wife, now he did get married, someone named Linda Mcmahon, who's a huge part of the story, too, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. From her political involvement to involvement in the company.
We'll get to the political stuff too, but yeah. She's been the kind of person who has mainly been backstage, but still influential. Although she did do stuff on the show, I believe. She has been a character. Yeah. I don't remember a whole lot of that, but was that in the Attitude Era?
No, it was, a little bit in the Attitude Era, if I remember correctly, but a lot of it carried into that Ruthless Aggression Era.
Okay, like the invasion.
Linda was very prominent around, if I'm just off the top of my head, maybe 02 to 07, 08, maybe on and off after that. But she had been...
she must have been a great business partner for him, for them to stay together so long. I mean, she's not the most beautiful woman in the world, and we know Vince likes beautiful women. So it is kind of interesting. I have a feeling that, it is really a huge business thing between them, because they
were married. They got married at 21 when Vince was 21. So it was just one of those,
Wow.
It was probably his college sweetheart or something.
Definitely, although it's hard to imagine those two as sweethearts, but I'm sure they were at one point in time.
Hey, they had 2 kids, and, there's some family photos out there. I'm sure it wasn't, Vince was all about that job, and Linda maybe felt like, this is all speculation, that if I'm involved with WWE, then I can, spend more time with my husband. Who knows?
Yeah. So, in 1979, Linda and Vince founded the company Titan Sports. And you've heard Titan Sports. Isn't Titan Towers the where WWE's headquarters? It's called Titan Towers, is it not?
I believe so, yeah.
Even though it's not even that big of a building.
And it's only one building, so to call it Towers is kind of...
Or maybe it's Titan Tower, but...
Titan Tower,
I don't know. I will tell you this. If you ever Google Maps Street View at WWE headquarters, it is in the most weird place. It's like there's neighborhoods right next to it. It's like it's not in any kind of central business district. Little interesting tidbit there. But So in 1982, they acquired control of the CWC from his ailing father, and his dad died in 1984. So at this point in 82, we have Vince on top already. He worked his way up the company and was able to get complete control over it, right? So we could really say that the Vince era starts in 1982, would you say?
Absolutely, and that would put him about 40 years running it, right? So,
Yeah.
and this is where it starts to get a little controversial, I think, right?
Yeah, for sure. Really, in the early 90s, there's a lot of it, but yeah, no, you're right. No, you're 100% right. And the reason, sorry, I forgot that. Yeah, so, and we'll talk about that here. So, when he purchased the WWF, professional wrestling was generally a regional thing, okay,
Yes.
right?
Or as you might have heard, the territories.
The
Territorial.
Yeah. And there was
Sorry about the sirens right now in the background.
Well, look where you live, dude.
Swear not coming from me. Oh, yeah, that's true.
I have a question. If you walk out your front door, how long till you see a homeless person?
I got assaulted by a homeless person last week.
Oh, boy.
Did I tell you? No, right?
You didn't tell me that. Do you want to tell me off the air, or do you want to tell the fans?
No, I can tell the story. Look.
No. Dude, did you file charges?
No. So I was coming back from the flea market with my drawings, so I live like a mile plus from it. So I was pulling my like a little, one of those little foldable wagons with a couple buckets of my drawings and the table and all that stuff. And I'm coming up this street that's about, I don't know, 1/10 of a mile from my house. So I'm like almost home. I'm sweaty. I'm ready to, and there's about across the street, this is, a smaller residential street. There's a dude that looks like could be in, the band Poison. He's got the eyeliner. And
oh boy.
He's clearly homeless. He's got, and I'm kid you not, he's got about an 8-foot pole in his hand.
Okay.
So he looks like he's trying to get into an apartment across the street, and I look and I'm like, okay, well, I'm just gonna keep doing my thing. And
yeah, that's probably the best.
He's clearly, dealing with a lot of mental illness, and I see him. He kind of locks eye contact with me, and he starts darting across the street. And I'm like, oh shit!
Oh no!
And he kind of comes up to me saying some kind of nonsense about, oh, why didn't you come? And like he gets, probably about 3 or 4 feet from me, and I'm like, dude, I don't know what you're talking about. And then he just whacks me with that thing, and
what?
He's
run?
like, I just kept pulling my thing, and then he, I'm like, dude, you need to get the hell away from me. And he kind of scattered, and I kind of had to look over my back a few times. And I got home like 5 minutes later, and I called the non-emergency number. I said, hey, there's a dude with a pole. He just hit me on such and such street. And they're like, oh, we're already there. Do you want to come down and like identify him and press charges? I'm like, no, just get him off the street. Like, I'm not going to go all the way down there. The guy clearly needs like mental help. Pressing charges isn't going to help do anything about that. So,
well, maybe that was a responsible choice on your part then, but
I wasn't going to go back down there.
That sucks, man. And for full transparency here, people, I've been homeless for years at a time back in the day. So, I'm not making fun of the issue. Being homeless, you see a lot of mental illness.
No,
a lot of
but I have absolutely, and that's the thing is like I feel like I'm not really mad about it. It was a little scary, but at the same time, I know the neighborhood I live in, that happens, and I live in a big metropolitan city, and those kind of things happen, and I was okay. It didn't really hurt. This actually just happened yesterday because a week ago I didn't really have it. It hurt a little bit, but then I noticed yesterday, I'm like, oh, it started to bruise. Like, it took a week to get to that point because it happened a week ago yesterday. So,
wow. Okay, then. Well, I'm sorry about that, Justin.
He didn't try and take anything. I was really just worried that my drawings were going to get damaged. So
that would suck.
I wasn't going to like fight the guy. Are you kidding me? Like, this guy's mentally ill with a giant pole.
Yeah,
like,
he's got the pole,
like, how
bro.
Stupid.
He was like the Grinch being touched with a pole.
I mean, I was like, I don't know what I was to him, like a fire-breathing dragon or something. I don't know. Like, it's not,
Ooh, that'd be
a,
pretty cool.
you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Anyways,
Okay. Well,
um,
very, very
back to Vince
interesting.
McMahon.
Yeah,
Um,
back to Vince McMahon because we got caught on homeless people. But so we talk about territories, right? And there was kind of a
yeah,
gentleman's agreement in the territorial days that you don't invade other people's territories.
no, you don't. But Vince did quite the opposite, didn't he? He not only invaded, he just basically destroyed every territory.
Well, he claims, that he had a different, or someone claimed that he had a different vision of what the industry could become. Honestly, he was right, but it came at the ire of many other wrestling promoters. So in '83, they split from the NWA, right? And the
Hmm.
NWA had all sorts of promotions, part of it. It almost gave some kind of legitimacy to wrestling. Like all these different promotions work under the NWA. We're talking all the way to Japan. And Vince is like, fuck the NWA. I don't need that.
What
So,
a brazen, ballsy thing to do, and of course you can see both sides of it, right? Like what a brazen, ballsy thing to do, and pioneer to the industry. It He did WrestleMania. He took over after that, and there were some more hiccups on the way, but eventually, ultimately, he won, right? But then at the same time, and even a more ironic thing is, you go to the future, and I believe Linda was, what is she, like she was in charge of small business commerce or whatever her role was in that
for
Trump
Trump,
administration.
yeah.
And ironically, they put a bunch of small businesses out of business
Oh,
in the 80s, right?
dude, her thing about her being on the small business thing is absolutely wild. That lady has no idea what a small business even is. But I guess that's kind of a different thing. So
Well,
he
running a business, yeah.
running a massive
And
business.
but running a business, yeah. I mean, she's very intelligent, I think, with all that stuff for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah, but
And
getting
I think we
businesses
might find
started.
out. She, at some point, she was responsible for a lot of that stuff going on. That was, you know, the behind the scenes stuff.
Oh,
Um,
I'm sure, man. I'm sure. So Vince started expanding the company, right? He started going into other people's territories. Vince's territory, by the way, was the Northeast. So kind of,
hmm
and I've always thought this, like, part of it's not so surprising that Vince, was able to grow when you think that he had the biggest metro area. His territory was the biggest metro area in America, right? Like
I mean, to this day, you'll still see people refer to WWE as New York.
yeah, yeah, or Stanford. I've heard it referred to that as well.
Yeah, the
Um,
New York territory.
yeah, for those that don't know, too, Stanford, Connecticut it's basically a suburb of New York. It takes a what you take a train, it takes like an hour, but if you don't understand
Connecticut in general is a suburb of New York.
New York, and you live in LA, so you understand this, but
Yeah.
a lot of people might not. Like New York is New York, and all these other places. It even stretches to Philadelphia. New York to Philadelphia is a 3-hour drive, and it's like nothing but city in between. It is a massive metro area, and that was the territory. So of course, the most money is going to be up there. New York's the biggest city in America. So it's not so
hmm
surprising that he was able to get the money and clout, being that he was lucky enough to inherit this company in the New York area, Northeast
And
area.
and if you're top guys in other areas, of course you want to perform at Madison Square Garden and in front of all
Mm-hmm.
those people, and you can definitely make way more money than you can in, let's say, the Pacific Northwest
Yeah.
or
Or
Florida
Arkansas.
or
Or
Minnesota or the
yeah.
Georgia Championship Wrestling. The
Yeah.
money was there.
And
Um,
and speaking of Minnesota, one of his big moves that really pissed people off was he started rating other companies for talent, right? And he made a big deal when he signed someone named Hulk Hogan from the AWA in 1984.
there you go. I mean, that's the start of it really all, right? Is when Vince McMahon met Hulk Hogan, that's when everything changed forever
Yeah.
for wrestling.
Well, I have this written here that Hulk Hogan and Vince drew the ire of industry peers because the promotion began traveling and broadcasting into other territories. So direct competition now. Not only direct competition, but, big name. They grew, obviously, Hulk to be a megastar. So, yeah. So McMahon also created the Rock and Wrestling Connection by bringing pop music stars kind of into the wrestling storyline. And that was real smart on Vince, because this is what helped bring wrestling into like a mainstream, right?
Yeah, and that's, having Cyndi Lauper there when she was probably at her most popular, around the time probably the Goonies was out and she was doing Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and what's the other song? Well, she had a bunch of hit songs.
She had a bunch. Actually,
Time After Time.
And Lou Albano was in the video for Girls Just Want to Have
Captain
Fun.
Lou, yeah. And then that also led to the Saturday morning cartoon, and that's when...
You said a wrestling cartoon?
Saturday morning cartoon, yeah.
Oh, I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, there was a total Saturday morning cartoon with Hogan and pretty much all of them. Junkyard Dog.
And what did they do in the show?
It was like kind of your typical little... adventure show. What was it called?
It was like Power Rangers, where like they just vanquish someone every week.
Something like that. Rock and roll wrestling cartoon. I don't remember the plot lines, but I did watch it when I was a kid. Hulk Hogan's Rock and Roll Wrestling. Originally aired on CBS from 1985 to 1986, with reruns airing in 1987. There's only 26 episodes.
A year, one season,
2 seasons.
I would have watched it as a kid, but
I watched it as a kid.
I was just being born then. So yeah, this was the Rock and Wrestling Connection. Not sure exactly what the Rock and Wrestling Connection means, but that was kind of the thing. Also, celebrities like Mr. T, right?
Yeah, and Liberace, even like they really were bringing in. Yeah. They started bringing in a lot of mainstream people for the times, and not only just having them wave their hands and be guests, but they injected them into storylines and into matches and all that. And yeah, I mean, a lot of that stuff we see today, from Bad Bunny to Logan Paul or whatever. It to
Grumpy Cat.
The Grumpy Cat. All originates from this stuff in the mid '80s, the rock and wrestling era.
Yeah, that's a great point, Justin. And remember, for the listeners, we're not talking about the history of WWE. We're talking about Vince, but really the two are synonymous. So
Vince was the beginning of that. I mean, and we also had a lot of other companies. WCW was doing the bad celebrity thing with guys like Dennis Rodman and Jay Leno.
God.
I mean, this was all predicated on what Vince did in the 80s, and it was people trying to inject celebrities and actors into a freaking if you want to blame somebody for David Arquette winning the WCW title, blame Vince. He's the one. He's the one that started bringing celebrities in first. So
yep, totally. And he was smart, and it did expand the fan base. So
totally.
Moving on from that, March 31st, 1985, Vince had this idea to make this huge mega show for wrestling. And, of course, the most generic name. But nowadays, the name is like a big deal, right? Like, it is the thing. But really, it's kind of a dumb name. And it's called WrestleMania. Now, if I heard that back in the 80s, I don't know, man. I have a feeling I'd be like, that's a stupid name. WrestleMania. But now we can't say it without thinking of all the history.
It's become like a Coke, right? Like,
yeah.
If your two kids are fighting in the living room, your old relative will be like, "What is it, WrestleMania?" Like,
Yeah, yeah, man. It's everyone knows it, even if you're not a wrestling fan. You've heard of it.
Exactly.
And
You might not know what it is, but you know what the term is, and you have a few people you tie to it. I mean, yeah, it's a household term for sure.
Yep. So the first one was at Madison Square Garden on closed circuit on various markets throughout the nation, and his success in with WrestleMania, Vince's success in WrestleMania is credited with starting the 80s pro wrestling boom. So, yeah, he was a smart businessman, and he wanted to grow, and he was very successful with that in the 80s. And in the 80s, he kind of shaped WWF into what we would call sports entertainment, right? Do you have anything to say about the word sports entertainment?
Well, it's a very, well, I guess we're saying this a lot with this is the theme, is polarizing, right?
Yeah.
But for the vision he had, I mean, it was probably the perfect term to use, right? For what it became at its peak, for what it was at its peak, it was the perfect term to use, right?
Yeah, I think so, but also, like, what people have to understand is Vince has always had a lot of contempt for the idea of, like, good old boys Southern wrestling. He really, especially the Southern part, Vince has always thought that was kind of like what you'd call mud show style stuff. And Vince has claimed that they don't do wrestling. That's what the old promotions in the bingo halls or whatnot used to do. They do sports entertainment. But at the same time, this is marketing. The genius of Vince. This is the marketing.
Oh, it's all marketing. Aspect. Yeah, like if I say Southern Pro Wrestling, the more words you use like that, the more narrow your audience becomes, right?
Yeah.
I say Southern, right away people from the North, West, East are they're not included. And then and then wrestling, that narrows it down too. So sports entertainment is such a generically broad term. And when you inject like celebrities and all that stuff into it, his idea was to make something that can, something for everybody is on the show.
Exactly. And what I have written here, actually, and I'm not going to lie, guys, a lot of this comes from all different websites. A lot of it comes from Wikipedia. So just to be transparent there, but exactly what you said, Justin. Sports entertainment brand that reached out to family audiences with the cartoon, right? And things like, what was it, Tuesday Night Titans, or that real weird show they did? Was that?
Yeah, it was like damn near. It was a talk show.
It was like a comedy talk show, man. So they reached out to family audiences while attracting fans who hadn't paid attention to pro wrestling before. And it was successful. He grew the fan base. He directed his storyline toward really highly publicized supercards and capitalized on a fledgling revenue stream with pay-per-view, which was very new at the time as well. Do you remember the advent of pay-per-view, or were you kind of young?
Advent of pay-per-view. I mean, I don't remember partaking in too many of them. I mean,
you didn't have an uncle who got the pay-per-views or whatever back in the 90s?
Oh, sure, but we would always go to someone else's house that had it.
Yeah, okay.
Or he would never order himself, or we had someone that had a black box.
Oh, really?
Or one of those, like, satellite cards where you get all the stuff.
I had a relative in New Mexico who had a black box, and it was awesome, dude. I remember watching Waterworld, if you remember that movie, and I was like, oh my gosh,
we saw the live show at Universal, who ironically Christopher Daniels used to be in for a while.
So tell me they're not still doing a Waterworld show at Universal.
No, they are. Oh yeah. Saw it twice this week.
It's got to be the least popular movie that they've ever made a ride out of.
Was that like a box office bust, or was that one of those other Costner movies, The Postman or whatever?
The Postman was the one that was like...
That was the one that was the bust, right?
Yeah.
It was like Mad Max, but he's a mailman or something.
Oh, God. I didn't even watch it because people had said, it was terrible. Waterworld cost about $173 million to make, and it made $264 million. So while that wouldn't be called a massive success, well, it is like over 100. It's like $100 million profit. So
But they were probably thinking it would have made 500 million. I bet.
I think so. I think so. I think
It was. I saw the movie. It was okay. It was good.
It's okay.
It was fine.
It is okay.
Yeah.
But
Dennis Hopper's great. But anyway,
Chris Hopper's great. So pay-per-view, man. Pay-per-view. Yes. It was a new thing, a new revenue stream, which is a big deal. Like, we can make money from something that is totally new, that people will pay for. And instead of having your big wrestling match on cable, it's like, nah, you can pay us directly to get it.
Yeah, I think we were getting to the point in home entertainment where TVs were starting to get in more and more households.
Cable was a thing.
Cable was a thing now. VCRs were starting to get affordable. Weren't quite there yet. But a lot of people were finding themselves happy with staying home and watching TV.
And the technology as well, because you actually had the ability to put cable boxes in people's house and specifically be able to have the cable company turn on and turn off certain things about your box, which before, you had your antenna and you had those channels. So it was just like listening to the radio. But this was like kind of Sirius XM before, when you make that radio analogy, it's like Sirius XM. It's like you pay to have your specialized things and you can pay a little extra. And I think that Vince is considered like one of the godfathers of pay-per-view. In fact, I think they had payperview.com for a while.
That would not surprise me. I mean, yeah, things like WrestleMania. I mean, those are probably one of the first big-time pay-per-views, and I would really love to see when boxing and stuff like that started doing pay-per-views. I mean,
yeah,
couldn't have been too far before or after WrestleMania.
Oh, I'm sure. And by the way, little trivia, payperview.com directs directly to WWE Network on Peacock.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Peacock, which lost $1 billion last year or something like that, or 500 million, like, Peacock itself lost so much money.
Really?
Which is interesting, yeah. These streaming services are starting to, I don't know if die is the right word right now, but they're at a crossroads. So we'll see where those go. We talk about pay-per-view now. Pay-per-view might be having to make a comeback out of necessity, especially when it comes to WWE.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah. We always talk about the AEW thing. It's like, geez, might as well just pay for this now because these streams are always going down. Don't want to talk too much about that. But just to be fair here, pay-per-view was around quite a bit before WWE, and it was a boxing thing. There was like services called Teleprompter. Teleprompter subscribers mailed $2 to watch boxing in 1960. So,
really?
yeah. So, very interesting. I'm going to have to do a lot more research on that, but it's probably a little different than the system. Obviously, like it's you mail money, and then there was no set-top box, so I'm not sure if it was like a closed circuit type thing. Or...
Sounds like some kind of pyramid scheme, where somebody that wants to watch boxing cuts out the cereal box barcode and sends $2 and nothing happens 6 weeks later.
Well, the Thrilla in Manila was sold on HBO, 500,000 views, and that was in 1975. So
when was cable television a thing? Like early 70s?
It looks like it was way before that, man. It's just, I think it was just not a big deal where mainstream and everyone had it. So it started in 1950, man. And there were hobbyist cable television in the 40s. So they took weak broadcasts, amplified them, and sent them over unshielded wires. So very interesting. I'm going to have to do a lot more because I think I was under the impression that kind of stuff started in the 80s. But I do think that is when it became a mainstream thing. It's like you have to have cable, and the cable shows were the things everyone was talking about. So, yeah. Moving on here about talking about Vince. Like we said, he shaped the sports entertainment thing, the super cards, and pay-per-view. And, this growing and growing resulted in, 1987, the Pontiac Silverdome.
Yes. Is that WrestleMania 3?
Yeah, Andre versus Hulk Hogan. Perhaps
to this
one
day,
of the most legendary WrestleManias of all time.
And if not the most legendary match of all time.
Yeah. And now I'm interested
in pro wrestling history.
I'm interested in how many people Vince actually got in the door, because the numbers are always real weird,
Yeah, didn't they say like 93,000, and it was really about, it was either way, it was an impressive crowd.
It was, I think, one of the biggest arena crowds of all time, which was surpassed by the massive Pope John Paul II at the TWA Dome in St. Louis, Missouri. So a lot of Catholic people really wanted to beat that WWE record, which it seems like they did. But listed here as 93,000. You watch the videos, it's pretty nuts. It's fucking wild, actually. Like, the dudes in the top seats are not there to watch the wrestling. They're just there to have fun.
Oh, they're all the, broadcast company,
Yeah.
execs. Yep. Just some things never change.
Yeah, so that was in 1987, and again, we have a lot of controversy as far as what was going on with other wrestlers. But in 1991, we had a major controversy. Do you know what that controversy I'm talking about is? 1991
Saudi
to 93?
Arabia.
No, it was the steroid trial.
Oh, yeah, steroid trial. Yep.
Yeah.
Of course.
To keep people in the loop, in 91, Dr. George Zaharian, a doctor who worked as a ringside doctor in WWF, was convicted of illegally supplying steroids. And at the trial, Zaharian, said that he supplied it to wrestlers and to Vince McMahon's office. So Linda had this idea that you shouldn't be hiring Zaharian because of the issue. But it happened. So in 1993, Vince was indicted. Now, to say something else, right before this, Vince tried to get into bodybuilding. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, I think he wanted to start like a what was it called? Some kind of worldwide bodybuilding
Federation.
Right. I think he was interested in that from his own personal hobbies and stuff as well.
Yeah.
But he had that all ready to go, and that 91 to 93 era is probably the time that we were the closest to having Vince McMahon go away for a while, until now.
Yeah, and I think that, I'm not sure if he did step down back then at all for a little bit. Of course, he would have to if he was going to court on a day that they ran a show. But he was indicted in 93, and they charged him with conspiring to distribute steroids, possession of steroids, with intent to distribute, and embezzlement for using money from Titan Sports for the steroids. So...
Yeah. And if you hear numerous, like, kind of people like Bruce Pritchard and everything talk about it, apparently they were putting together a plan for if he was to go...
If you did get
for a while.
Oh, if he did get convicted.
If he got convicted. So there's rumors from just like Vince running it from a jail cell, which I guess theoretically could have happened, especially if they were not a publicly traded company at the time. And they even brought in, the rumor was they brought in Jerry Jarrett to see if he would take over.
Really?
Yeah, I think they never got to the point where they actually had a full-fledged plan. But there was, like, kind of a little behind-the-scenes stuff as to what to do if, Vince was going to go away for a while.
Oh, man. Wow. To add...
Much like now, I really find it hard to believe he's going to have nothing to do with it now.
Well, he has... I think there was a source who recently said that he told him a few years ago, like, I will never, ever not be part of this company.
Oh, of course. And we all thought it was going to be when he would be running it from hospice. He would be running it from a hospital bed whenever he was out. He would be making calls from the old folks' home. Like,
he would
there was no way.
create an AI that is a copy of him so that it could run the company forever.
I mean, and I just find it hard to believe he's going to be able to detach. What is he going to do? What is he doing tomorrow?
That's what I told you. What's he going to do? Like, sit there and watch TV? Like the dude's been working for 40 years.
You said in all his spare time, what's he going to do? No. It's like all his time is spare now, right? If that's the case. If he's...
Yes.
So this
is a guy has never had spare time in 4 years, man.
This is a guy who never sleeps.
4 hours a night.
Wakes, goes to the gym at 3 o'clock in the morning. This dude is in for a rude awakening, man. In terms of, no pun intended, to the late. Yeah. I mean, he's gonna need something quick. I mean, he could, I don't know. He might be just.
He is the definition. He is the pinnacle of what a workaholic is, man.
He might start running little indie shows all over Connecticut. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe he'll get back into football. Maybe he'll get into bodybuilding, but none of that is wrestling, and that is his bread and butter. So, I don't know if you know this, but prior to the steroid trial, Mcmahon actually lost a lawsuit from Jesse Ventura over almost $1 million in royalties owed for the color commentary. So.
Yes, and I think to this day, he owes him money still or something. I don't know, something like that. Jesse the Body.
Yeah, and Jesse the Jesse the Body is a little bit of a crazy nut too. So I mean,
a little more lovable and he's a little more lovable than Vince is, though. I think.
Isn't he like he's not like Alex Jones level, right?
No.
Okay.
He is kind of libertarian, but kind of swings left a lot.
Oh, does it? So, but he is like grounded, like he is like down to earth. Probably not.
I mean, he was on Jericho's podcast.
He was just on Jericho's podcast. I was thinking of listening to it, but
it was great because you know how Jericho's wife was at the January 6th thing, right?
Yeah. Oh God.
He went off on that, saying they raided my capital.
Oh.
And those people and Jericho just had to kind of sit there and
take it,
smile and nod and say, kind of, yeah. He didn't say anything. He just was like, yeah.
Okay.
But he was totally, and he's been a very anti-Trump and all that stuff too. So,
wow. Okay,
but anyways,
and he is a Republican, so I'll have to listen to that. Eventually, and there's another character here, which is Sam Mushnick, who I believe is a reporter that covered a lot of this steroid trial stuff and brought a lot of news out. And in WWF in the time, and I know all this from just listening to Meltzer a lot, but I believe that Mushnick was considered like the villain, and Vince was like the hero as far as in WWF. And it played out that the judge dismissed the distribution charges on the grounds the prosecution had insufficient evidence, and it was a jury deliberation. They deliberated.
I think you might get it. Sam Mushnick, wasn't he like a promoter?
They both have the last name Mushnick. Am I getting the Mushnicks mixed up?
Well, there's a Sam Mushnick. I remember that as a wrestling promoter, which is kind of very ironic.
Okay,
though.
I'm
that
sorry,
somebody
guys.
named Mushnick would take him down because I think that was probably a territory that he raided. So
yeah,
he was the NWA president
Phil
from
Mushnick.
1950. Okay, there you go. That makes sense now.
Thank you for that, by the way.
We're all about accuracy here and 100% correctness. So
I get those names mixed up. That's a fair fuck up. I mean, Mushnick's kind of a rare last name anyways. So it was Phil Mushnick. Sam Mushnick was the West Coast wrestling promoter, I think, Big Time Wrestling and the Cow Palace and all that sort of stuff. So Phil Mushnick was the reporter. Did you know
he was this Midwest St. Louis guy?
Did you know that recently they were planning on making a movie about the steroid trial?
Well, I know they were making a Hogan
documentary.
Or there was some kind of Netflix
Vince
McMahon vehicle that was kind of canceled when all this stuff started coming out. I mean, honestly, like, very interesting guy to make a movie about. It would be probably a very good movie with the right material.
Yeah, just with the right material, but there would not be the right material. WWE doesn't make good documentaries as it is. They have a total revisionist attitude, and the idea was, seeing Vince McMahon as the hero in the steroid trial, even though there was still a lot of shady stuff going on. And then Phil Mushnick would have been the villain. He would have been the evil reporter. I'm sure that would have been the case because they want to create an image. But that has now been scrapped. I would be interested in it, Justin, honestly.
Yeah, it couldn't have been. Was WWE really going to make this? Come on. Why would they touch that with a 10-foot pole?
They had to allow it. Yes, they were involved. Huh. That's what I'm saying. They were going to make him like the good guy. This was not like Dark Side of the Ring, man.
Yeah. I have a hard time. Yeah, I don't know how that would have.
Yeah, they were going to work with Vince.
Who was supposed to play Vince McMahon? I know there was somebody.
Maybe it was maybe it was a documentary. But let me find Netflix Vince McMahon. Because again, we want to. Okay, so it would have been a documentary. Yeah, it would have been a documentary. And
I don't think it would have been. Oh, I guess if it was negative, they wouldn't have canceled it, huh?
Yeah. No, it was deep in the post-production, so it's probably almost done. I'd love to see that thing. Hopefully, it comes out in a hacked email or something years down the line. We will do a watch along if that happens. So sure. So they were working on that Netflix thing that was pulled because of the allegations. And to go back in the future, by the way, these allegations state that Vince paid $12 million for this hush money claims. Someone did the math and was like, he could have just hired a high-end prostitute daily for $12 million. Like, it would have lasted him like years and years and years and years.
I kind of wonder though if they find out, if the news comes out, who busted this open? Was it the Wall Street Journal?
Yeah.
Some business guy was looking at records, or how was this actually found out?
Well, they're not going to say who their sources are, but it's probably...
No, I don't know who their sources are, but some guy was going through some... an accountant was going... somebody was going through some papers and found this stuff, right? Like, is that what happened?
I don't know the details of how the Wall Street Journal found the story.
Right.
It could involve the people coming to the Wall Street Journal.
So what if they discover that Vince McMahon employed a full-time prostitute, numerous full-time prostitutes? That could have come out on a morality clause too, because they would have probably had to sign NDAs as well, right?
Yeah, because he wouldn't want the prostitutes coming out and being like, I fucked Vince McMahon every day for 5 years straight.
I think where this whole thing comes out, like, oh yes, it's not illegal, but it gets really, really touchy when you're hiring someone to be like, I don't know, a paralegal, and they don't have experience at being a paralegal, and then you double the salary out of nowhere, then that becomes not illegal conduct, but probably...
It's definitely unethical for the business.
Boards of, trustees and corporations don't like when you hire somebody and then you want to double their salary even though they don't know how to do their job.
Yeah.
That's probably not a good business practice, and it falls under moral guidelines.
Definitely not a good look for Vince, and I think he knows that as well. So during the steroid trial, the jury deliberated for 16 hours and the conspiracy charge and he was shown not guilty. A big win for him. Why do I see him wearing a neck brace? Was he wearing a neck brace during the trial?
I think he was in a car accident or something like that.
Okay, the car didn't explode. It was just...
No.
Okay.
He didn't die.
We'll get to that in a bit here.
Very pivotal moment in pro wrestling history. Could you imagine if Vince was convicted? What would have happened with,
Well, only
the world? The butterfly effect right there.
Yeah, well, I guess they had a backup plan, so who knows? But yeah, who knows?
Yeah, it looks like they had some
happened.
kind of plan going, but he probably would have gotten out in a couple years and been back in plenty of time. Does he, for the Razor Ramon and Diesel leaving or something? He'd probably be back around that time, let's say, but he still would have been running that place through.
Oh yeah, for sure. He
On
had
the phone.
He had pretty much infinite money to pay on phone bills and doing visits.
Yeah,
so,
he would have been fine.
And to be honest here, McMahon did use steroids.
Well, I'm sure he did.
He admitted to it. He said he used them before they became illegal. And
okay.
And that's a whole different conversation. I think
And
I don't
during.
even know if I am anti steroids, but I think they're probably used irresponsibly. They are legal in Japan, so it's an interesting thing here. But he did use them.
I think it really comes into effect more with competitive athletes, where it gives them performance enhancing drugs, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. But as far as legality goes,
they only harm the person using them, I guess. Unless you get roid rage.
But this is America too, and we're a pretty fucked up place. So maybe we had to make them illegal because otherwise you'd have like normal ass people shrinking their testicles and dying of heart attacks at a young age.
Well, I think a lot of it is the harm it does to your body if not used properly.
Yeah.
And it could be very poisonous if you don't use it right.
Have you ever seen the documentary? I think it's called Better, Faster, Stronger.
I've heard of it, but no.
Yeah, it's pretty good, and it's kind of a centrist view on steroids, but there's some pretty disturbing stuff in there, like the dudes who have arms that are like, sickly huge.
Right.
So,
like can't lift them over their head huge.
Like can't wipe their ass, yeah. So
that's so hilarious.
After this happened, McMahon declared his company drug-free, and WWF brought in a hardcore independent drugs testing policy after that. So I think especially, this is the post-Reagan era war on drugs type of thing too, DARE, right? So, of course, he felt like he probably had to do that. And any wrestler at the time caught with drugs, which was pretty common, actually. I don't think it worked that well, to be honest, man. Let's be honest, right?
It was during that time. Drugs are bad, okay? I mean, that was the time where, there was, like you said, the war on drugs, the Nancy Reagan stuff, and
DARE and
all that awareness. And
this is your brain on drugs.
Yeah, and listen, there were some people that abused steroids, and it really, really... look at Lyle Izado and a lot of people like that, where you kind of understand where they were made illegal in a way, because if people take them and abuse them, they can deteriorate pretty fast. And
mental issues as well.
Roid rage, all that kind of thing.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I mean, steroids are a prescribed thing that people would get to heal their body after, like, a surgery or, that kind of thing. Like, they're prescribed to do something, and one prescribed to do something like heal a body and muscles after surgery or accident or whatever. They're effective and can be used safely. I mean, I don't know if you ever heard of the baseball player Ken Caminiti.
No. I know Barry Bonds. Died.
Yeah, Bonds a whole other story. But Ken Caminiti, he admitted he used steroids, and he said he started using it because he tore a muscle. He was out for X amount of weeks, months, whatever, and the doctor prescribed steroids to heal the muscle and to let the muscle, grow back or whatever. And he just saw the incredible results and he got hooked on him from using him as an injured player to recover.
Wow.
And to get him back to play faster, and then he just didn't stop from that point on. And there you go. And then, of course, when they do stop, you see him lose the weight, lose the muscle mass or whatever. But listen,
And they get
wrestling.
the 6-pack gut too. Have you seen that? Like the weird
Yeah,
the weird Joe Rogan like 6-pack gut, which someone
but
has told me like that's not natural at all.
I mean, here's the thing: is pro wrestlers are in a very aesthetics are very important, right? In terms
Very
of what they
important.
look
And
like.
by the way, we go listen to Wrestling and Sex because we talk about that aesthetics in wrestling in that episode.
Yeah, and here's the thing: is pro wrestlers don't always, or especially in the '80s and '90s, '70s, whatever, didn't have the luxury that they have today with a lot of guys that are getting paid for not wrestling if they're at that high level. Some of the indie guys maybe not, but if you get an injury in AEW, you're not just not paid. You have
No,
a contract
no.
where you're paid, and WWE same thing. So back in the '80s, if you tore a muscle, you were most likely not only performing with it, but then you were also probably using steroids to make it heal faster.
All sorts of issues there, man. But like I said, he went for the anti-drug thing after that whole thing had to change the public image of the company. And an example, it still kind of goes on to this day. Two Dimes was recently released, but of course we hear stories about, and we even did an episode Wrestling and Drugs, right? So
Yes,
or
we did.
Wrestling and Addiction,
And
I'm
addiction
sorry.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So man, we eventually, Justin, we're gonna have covered everything. So. But it's Crush was actually fired for having steroids and marijuana, which he was caught with. He was arrested for that, and they fired him. So there was an example from back then about their kind of hardline stance. Moving on through the years here, you had, of course, the Monday Night Wars,
Yes.
the Attitude Era, probably the one of the the biggest era, and this was kind of where McMahon cemented the WWF as the wrestling promotion in the late 90s, by initiating a new brand strategy that brought it to prominence, because he was losing to WCW for a little while.
He was losing. You had the advent of the NWO, which of course became the famous 83 weeks in which WCW was just defeating WWE almost every week, as both of their brands were growing in popularity, and hitting their stride more. And as this occurred, this is the time where, Vince became more than just an announcer, more than just a voice. This is the time when he was not only first being a non-screen character, but he was actually being acknowledged as the owner of the WWF, and not a lot of people knew that through the 80s and in the early 90s, unless you were, reading.
I didn't. I thought
The
I was a
Observer.
kid. I just thought he was an announcer.
We were kids. I'm sure people kind of knew, like if they were big time, into it fans, or
If you read the sheets,
if you read the sheets, if you were doing that. And then, of course, we know that was way less people that didn't even know that Vince McMahon is actually the owner, probably until, he started that back and forth with Stone Cold and Bret Hart.
yeah, you weren't seeing Ted
in
Turner in the
97.
ring, that's for sure. But
No.
this is part of the, I guess, genius of Vince was his ability to read the room, which is funny because nowadays people call him out of touch, but back then he could read the room and read kind of where society was going, and he sensed this shift towards like a more hardened and cynical fan base. So
Yep.
he sensed this shift where Hulk Hogan was just not the type of wrestler that people wanted anymore. They wanted someone more edgy, right? And that's when he started redirecting storylines towards this attitude, WWF attitude. And they often say that the era commenced after the Montreal Screwjob. Do you want to quickly just tell fans the Montreal Screwjob, what Vince is involved in with that?
Well, highly recommended. I know we talked about it before, and I made you watch it because when we first started doing this podcast, you hadn't seen it yet, which is Wrestling with Shadows, and I'm sure it's somewhere. It might be on Amazon Prime or something. You can find Wrestling with Shadows. And if you guys are a wrestling fan, you've gotten this far with us and you haven't watched Wrestling with Shadows, which is quite possibly the best wrestling documentary ever created, in terms of the content. And maybe I'm biased because Brett's my all-time favorite,
great.
but it's great. Really excellent. And it came out about the same time as Beyond the Mat did, which was another really great documentary that gives you an inside life about it. But basically,
and you can watch it on Tubi for free, Justin.
Tubi's great. I love Tubi. Sponsor us. Sure. We'll do commercials for you.
Yeah, you can watch it on Tubi for free with ads. So definitely check it out.
I might, if the G1 wasn't on after this, I might have checked it out. I love watching that one. Watch it again?
I can see that. And Vince plays a central role in that.
Yeah. So you can say what you want. I find, basically the story revolves around Bret Hart. But Bret Hart is coming to the end of his contract, and I'm going to say this real quick because I know that a lot of people have heard the Montreal Screwjob. If they've gotten this far and they listen to us, they probably know the Montreal Screwjob.
For sure.
Basically Bret did not want to lose the title in Canada. Vince obviously wanted him to before he left for WCW. And one thing led to another, and Bret thought he was losing it the next night on Raw, or he would give it up the next night on Raw, and there was supposed to be a schmoz for Survivor Series 97, but that's not what happened. Basically, Bret rang the bell, and Shawn Michaels, they fixed a fixed match, I guess you can say, and that basically they called. That's where you hear Screwjob finish. That's why it's all comes from that one night where the result was changed.
What happened to Vince immediately after?
Well, he was spit on right after the match. You could see Bret, and then
backstage.
Bret punched him in the face backstage.
And he took it like a man, too.
He knew he was going to come find him, and that's what he did. And it's one of the most controversial moments in professional wrestling history. And, of course, it's got to have Vince involved in the equation.
He got spit on. Yeah. So
right after.
It's exactly what happened. And at that point, a lot of people say, that's where the Attitude Era began. And McMahon, who had downplayed his ownership of the company and was kind of known as a commentator, like I said, this is the point where he became involved in WWF storylines as Evil McMahon. By the way, I saw a great tweet from Jim Valley, or I heard about a great tweet from Jim Valley. I'm just going to tell you it real quick, okay?
Yeah.
Vince screwed Vince. Right?
Simple, but works very well, yes. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
So, and then he got into the legendary feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I don't want to go too much on that because there's a whole series of episodes that we're going to do on that. I mean, we've already talked about doing a 97 rundown. But
we've done the first quarter of 97 so far.
Yeah. So this feud, though, with Stone Cold Steve Austin made the WWF just explode. They were doing millions of viewers. They overtook WCW, and it became one of the highest rated shows on TV. So, Vince knew what the audience wanted. He really did back then. And he gave it to us. He gave it to us as kids, and he gave the adults too. He gave us what we wanted. And every week we wanted to see Vince get his ass kicked.
And every week they teased it. They had little stuff happen that made us love it. And the slow play of Stone Cold to become champion that basically lasted about a year and a half, really. It's amazing. They don't really slow play people like that anymore. Vince, from early 97, Stone Cold was the man, right?
Oh, hell yeah.
He had the IC title a little bit, and he had some good things with Bret Hart. He was with The Rock before then, and he even had a couple title shots, I think, against Shawn Michaels and The Undertaker before he actually won it, and then he won the Royal Rumble in 98.
Mike Tyson?
had a thing with Mike Tyson, and then finally, a year and a half later, he went from winning the Royal Rumble in '97, not having this shot at WrestleMania, but probably had one of the most iconic matches in WrestleMania history. I know we mentioned Hogan and Andre, but Bret and Stone Cold in '97.
Oh yeah,
in that I Quit match,
evergreen match that you can just watch over and over.
It's amazing. It's got everything.
Highly recommend Stone Cold's commentary on it too, where he actually tells you like all the he's going hit me,
Yeah. One of the greatest wrestling matches of all time, without a doubt. And that's up with, a lot of the New Japan stuff that we've watched.
Yeah.
I mean, Bret and Stone Cold is just an absolute masterpiece. If you haven't seen it, please watch it and then watch it again.
And
great stuff.
I'm sure Pat Patterson had a lot to do with that. Brilliant wrestling
Sure.
mind. However, this is what people need to understand, and this is something I really didn't realize until like 2014, 15, which is that Vince, everything goes through him. Everything goes through him.
Yeah, right. I mean,
nothing on these shows, nothing doesn't go through him. And so he's the be-all, end-all. All creative choices, wrestling moves, everything. It's approved by Vince McMahon.
And listen, we've heard people criticize the writing staff, creative, but it's really on Vince. And I know that I've gotten you to listen to it a few times, but Matt McCarthy on the We Watch Wrestling podcast, who was a writer for about, a year and a half or so.
As most writers are, last a year or two.
Yeah, he says, you think we're not sitting there thinking of all those awesome ideas that you're thinking of to do? Of course we are, but they all get shot down because everyone's writing to the audience of one.
The audience of one. Yeah, that is the phrase, the audience of one.
Yeah, and that audience of one was way more connected with the world in 1998, 1997 than it is in, 2009 and above or whatever. So, I mean, that's really the moral of the story, is I know they say he's, we've all changed and things are different for us now, but I think Vince is a little less of that. I think his sense of humor, what he finds entertaining is probably a lot closer to what it was. It was a little more consistent throughout the years. Of course, it changed with the times, but although, let's say, we've been back watching WWE since, 2014, 2013-ish?
Yeah.
Hasn't been all terrible, but to be honest with you, if we will go back and watch a lot of that Attitude Era, 97, 98 is really, really good stuff. But then, even though it was real popular in 99, 2000, not a lot of that ages well in terms of,
True.
Its acceptance and its all that now. There's a lot of stuff that just doesn't age well. But, man, was it perfect back then, and did people love it back then? I mean, that's when you couldn't walk down the street without seeing an Austin 316 shirt. I mean, it was everywhere.
I remember reading video game magazines doing features on Vince and WWE and just talking about how it's more popular than it ever has been. And I remember as a kid, a middle schooler, thinking yeah, of course it's popular. It's fucking awesome. So
it will never reach that level again. There's just too much choice for kids and people in general. I just don't feel it's still big in a way. I mean, they're still making money hand over fist over there, but there is no way that as ingrained it was in popular culture in those late 90s. I just don't see it getting to that level again.
Yeah,
and a lot of that is Vince McMahon. I think back then, just the evolution of how the company has been. It was back in the, 80s, 90s. You had Vince, you had Pat Patterson, you had Bruce Pritchard, you had maybe Gerald Briscoe, Jim Cornette for a little bit,
Michael
Vince
Hayes.
Russo, Michael Hayes, maybe Vince Russo probably had a lot to do with those, 97, 98 into 99 times and storylines.
Yeah, Gerald Briscoe.
Yeah, yeah, and Cornette for a little bit too. I think I already said him,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
you get the idea. A lot smaller teams, and of course Vince was the head of the table, and now it's this corporate structure now, where it's Vince with 37 writers or whatever it is,
Yeah, and
just
I
kind
don't
of
know if I mentioned this, but in '99, Vince did lead the company in the public offering. So that was in 1999, and that was when he brought the company public. Probably a pretty damn good idea, putting the company public, getting a huge surplus of income, and now Vince has so much money in stock. I mean, God, I don't even. I mean, he owns most of the company still, which is a whole other thing, right? Like,
yeah. I mean, a lot of people got very rich from that uh, public making the company public, from him to some talent. Guys like Jim Ross probably made tons of money
oh, I
when
wouldn't
the
be
company went
surprised if a
public.
lot of those dudes still have shares. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
At least like thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars worth that they could dump any time. I know not too long ago, Triple H and Stephanie sold a bunch of their stock. Probably made
yeah.
a good chunk of change off that. And Vince right now probably has millions, if not tens of millions dollars worth of stock that he could easily dump. So that public offering, big time money deal there.
And it was a no-brainer. You had to do it, and they were at their peak of popularity. He probably thought he could maintain it forever, and he could still do whatever he wants.
Yeah.
But at some point, as society became a little, I don't know if I want to say censored is more the right word, but
A little more woke.
yeah, I just think that things kind of settled down a little bit. Those mid 90s to early zeros was a pretty unpolitically correct time.
Oh, for
I
sure. But behind Vince,
I guess
I
to
mean,
say
you
the
had the
least.
bra and panty matches. You had some
Bra and
racist stuff
panty
on there.
matches. Yeah, you had some very, you know, I don't think it was intended to be racist, but it was racist when you look at it back in the day.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't. It didn't occur to me back then. It was like it did a lot of it wasn't anything that
I just thought it was kind of funny with like gold
I just thought
dust
it.
and stuff.
Let's say when the Nation of Domination, when DX's blackface, basically making fun of
Oh
them.
boy.
That wasn't something that occurred to me back then. I wasn't a fan. I was on the Nation side of things because I just I love The Rock and stuff, but I didn't. Of course, we grow and we evolve as a society, and we look back at that and it's probably not a good idea. So
Yeah, and as far as Vince goes, I definitely don't think Vince is racist. I think he has an idea of who he wants as a champion. Black champions have had trouble keeping a championship and getting huge pushes from him. I don't think he is intentionally racist, but I do think that he is a little bit prejudiced as far as, which in a way you have to be as a promoter, but at the same time, as in that you have to know the right people to push and who's going to cater to the best audience, the biggest audience. But
he's got a formula in his head.
He's got a formula. He's got an image in his head of who those people are. So,
and for a while, it was big, muscular people, and then women that were
today.
quote unquote perfect tens. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if I said this on air, but Serena Deeb had to get a boob job to get into the WWE. So
I mean, yeah, it doesn't surprise me, and you got to think of a guy like AJ Styles, who has consistently been one of the best wrestlers in the world, and wouldn't even get a look at WWE until 2015 when the guy was
blew up in New
his
Japan.
mid to late 30s. Yeah,
he had to
be probably from
he had to
a
become
guy like
one
Triple
of the,
H influencing.
He had to become one of the best wrestlers in the world to get into WWF.
Everywhere
WWE,
else,
sorry.
yeah, and get to his mid 30s, and I guess he's become a little more open minded when it's come to stuff like that. He's brought in guys like Shinsuke Nakamura and all that, but he hasn't really done much with them, has he? But
well, he's been on TV constantly, but yeah, he had, like you said
Sure.
before, just enough, right? But yeah, it's been tough. He's had some black stars that were in great opportunities to get pushed, and then he kind of took it away from them. I didn't think Kofi was a necessarily great champion, but I did think Big E was. And I didn't like how Vince handled both of them. Were just crushed.
I was just going to say both of them deserved way better.
Both of them deserved better. So
you think about guys like Daniel Bryan and Kofi, whose stories had to be basically arm twisted into happening.
Yeah.
Rather than just someone recognizing, hey, this could be really special if we did this.
Which is so different from the Vince in the late 90s, who really was in touch with what the fans wanted. So something changed there. And maybe it wasn't Vince that changed. Maybe it was society that changed and Vince staying the same. But for someone who was so progressive for the business in the 80s and 90s, it is kind of wild that over time he did lose his ability to be so progressive, in my opinion.
But, let's not say that, but I mean, I think he's a big reason for the WWE Network happening. So there's a progressive side. He was ready to stream. I think he might have been talking about having his own channel,
I
way
heard
before
that.
Netflix. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
but
I think they've always had the idea to have a channel.
Yeah, at the same time, I've heard that they lost a lot of money from the WWE Network, and that while it was technologically progressive, the idea that you could have kept those things on pay-per-view and made a lot more money, and people would have bought them instead of paying $10 a month. So
it really depends on the formula. Like if you have 1 million people subscribe to the network and pay $10 a month, or 50,000 people buy $50 pay-per-views, it really just it really depends.
Yeah, it does depend, but you're right. That was technologically progressive, and he was on that train quite a bit before the streaming services really blew up. So,
and you know what? In a way, he got out of the streaming service game before companies like Netflix were hemorrhaging subscribers. Think about that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
He sold all the content to Universal, got a ton of money, and then what was happening in the months after that, I don't know if that's all him. That could be a Nick Khan thing or something, but...
Well, like we've said before, man, it all has to get approved by him, right? So...
Absolutely. So, yeah.
It's definitely him. After the Stone Cold thing, we had the McMahon Helmsley era. I'm going to kind of just run down these eras without getting too deep into them, because a lot of this time I wasn't watching wrestling either.
But talking about let's acknowledge this in terms of the Stone Cold era. Vince has had some of the most iconic, hilarious, and just crazy moments in that Stone Cold era, whether it was the Bang 316 and he pees himself and getting hit with the bedpan in the hospital, his reactions to... you're fired to when
Stone Cold in handcuffs and all that stuff for being arrested.
It was me, Austin. It was me. And just the little faces he would make, the facial expressions, the anger he would get. Some absolutely hilarious moments that are timeless. And if you watch any of those things with Austin, and it's great stuff. And what a heel,
Kenny Omega considers Vince McMahon the best heel in the history of the business. So.
I don't see that. Nothing.
Not
wrong
a
with
controversial
that
statement.
No, he's definitely. I mean, I'd have to really do a little bit of a thought, but I definitely think he would be in the top 3 or 5, if not number 1. And
yeah,
he's up there for sure. He's on the Mount Rushmore of heels for sure.
Definitely. So there was the McMahon Helmsley era that, kind of where I guess they had their little clique, I guess, right? And Stephanie McMahon got married and all that sort of stuff.
The corporation, yeah.
There was the Invasion, which Vince was part of, that was kind of considered a flop. I've gone back and watched a lot of it on the network, and I didn't hate it as much as other people, but you always hear about how they weren't able to bring over a lot of the big names from WCW, and the people that they did get, weren't
ready for that spot.
Yeah. No Goldberg back then, or at least not much.
No Nash, no Hall.
No Nash, no Hall. Until a little
Sting.
later. No Sting. until a little later, and then just treating people like DDP like badly booked and that sort of thing. But I still have this image in my head of Vince saying he wanted to destroy the WWE, and then he's like, "Oh, what'll I do?" And then it says NWO in the mirror. You ever seen that?
I've heard of that. Yeah,
they had to write it backwards so it would show in the mirror, which kind of made no sense. After that, we had the faked death, and this was the exploding limousine, which they still have in a warehouse somewhere.
I'm sure they do.
Illegitimate son. Now, who was Vince's illegitimate son again?
Hornswoggle,
yeah. And that bothered Vince, right?
That Hornswoggle was his son?
Yeah.
It was, I think so, yeah. I wasn't really connected to that era, but I think Hornswoggle was more fond of him than he was of him or something like that.
Also, a little before this time, we had the Battle of the Billionaires, Bobby Lashley. President Donald Trump, who was in the WWE. Yet, but we call him that. We call him former President Donald Trump.
He was the host of, what was probably the biggest
reality
TV show.
Whatever
in
that
America
show
at
was
the time.
called.
The Apprentice, right? Was that
The Apprentice?
What it was called?
Yep.
Yeah. So that was him, and of course, WWF has a huge history with Donald Trump. If you go back to the WrestleMania, I can't remember, was it 4 that was at Trump in Atlantic City?
Okay.
So I think there was at least 1 or 2 they had there, and Donald Trump's in the WWE Hall of Fame.
and also not only do they have a relationship with him, but this ties back to the trying to get widespread appeal by incorporating celebrities into their show.
Absolutely. So that's what led to that, and that was that kind of Vince's last kind of in-ring moment?
No.
Bret Hart, right?
We got a few here. After that, there was the $1 Million Mania. After that, he had the Legacy and the Bret Hart. So that was 2009, 2010. Do you know anything about that?
Not the Legacy, but I do know about the Bret Hart thing.
And
I know the Legacy was it DiBiase's son and Cody Rhodes?
Oh God, I don't even know. Rhodes Scholars, weren't they?
I don't see. I was so
I was out of it back then, probably for good reason.
Because I think the product got really bad from you know what it is. I know a lot of people like this too. Right, so we can say the way he handled the Benoit death, and Eddie Guerrero, those things happening. I think
and
that
how
was
did
the time.
How did he handle that, Justin?
So I know at least with the Benoit death. So here's the thing too. This is I think I know a lot of people. I was still kind of watching here and there, and I knew who they are and everything. But this is when a lot of people really started to check out. Once Benoit died, and when the whole Benoit, that horrible tragedy, with that happened, a lot of people kind of checked out of wrestling at that point because the guys are doing this kind of stuff. I can't,
I still hear people criticize wrestling to this day for the Benoit death. I've had people say, why would I watch that shit? Fucking dumbasses that go and kill their family.
Right. And, that's a whole other thing. But, at least with the Benoit, I believe the night that it happened, or that they, that Monday Night Raw after it was discovered, they came out and, I don't know if he dedicated a night to it or whatever. He had, a positive stuff to say about him or whatever.
Because they didn't know what had happened completely,
right? And then they had to pretty much retract it the next week, and that's when his name basically became persona non grata on anything, and understandably so. I think the way that was handled was probably appropriate, and Yeah, that was another. He's had to be at the forefront of that stuff as well.
Well, and like you said, this was a period when a lot of people were checking out. I think really it kind of started near the invasion in 2000s or 2003, 4, 5, post Stone Cold, right? Stone Cold left in 2005.
Something like that. Maybe
Yeah.
2003 was his last
The
match.
the Rock was getting into Hollywood,
Mm-hmm.
and
And
yeah,
Vince will thank The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, as he's known now, will thank him left and right for it. And, you know, went on to be arguably the biggest movie star in the world.
yeah, one of them, if not like the biggest celebrity, besides maybe some political figures, but definitely one of the most popular people in the world. Yeah, so obviously a name we haven't brought up is John Cena.
Mm-hmm.
I guess not much to say about him except that, Vince, another product of Vince McMahon.
And I don't think he'll allow another guy to get as big as he was. As big as Cena is.
You don't think he would allow that anymore? Is it because of this idea that the company is what matters? It's not the wrestlers, it's the company.
I think,
and
that's
of course
when
he doesn't run the company anymore. But
yeah, I think that's when the mindset changed. Was at Cena was the last guy that they were gonna let get bigger than the company, or I don't even know if you can even say that about Cena, to be honest.
I have yeah. I mean, at the same time, though, the only way that wrestling does get really popular is when they do have huge stars. So, maybe that's not a great idea on his part. But we had
yeah, I've always had a problem with that. But that's allegedly what they don't want to. I mean, that could be wrong. I mean, I could see them coming back with, like, why would we not want that to happen? Are you kidding me? Like,
yeah,
of course we want something to be a household name.
Well, they've tried, and it just hasn't worked. It hasn't really worked with Roman Reigns to the same extent. So after that, there was a storyline with CM Punk and John Laurinaitis. That was in 2011, 2012. And there was his last, kind of major storyline was The Authority. And
yeah, and, it wasn't always him, but he would pop up here and there, whether it was
sporadic appearances after that.
Sporadic appearances, and that's when I think you can start to see him physically just not looking as well as usual. Obviously, his physical body, but his voice started to kind of change, and his eyes started to get a lot baggier.
His voice definitely changed. It's a little more quiet now, and where he had more growl back in the day. So,
but it got a little more shredded over the years.
And I'm sure Vince, as powerful as he is, wishes he could be more powerful than Time. But Time is the one thing that he really has no control over.
Doesn't do a job, right? Or whatever they say. Time is undefeated.
Yep.
Time doesn't do a job for anybody. So.
And sleep.
That's
different. The other one. Sleep. You have no power of sleep.
Listen, man, he definitely deprived himself of that stuff for a very long time.
Yeah, for sure. And you probably still will. I mean, they say you sleep less the older you get, so I can only imagine the dude's probably getting 2 hours a night at this point. In 2000, that's kind of like a shorthand history of his storylines and him as a performer, and some of the decisions he's made. Moving on to more trivial issues but interesting things is in 2006. So this is years ago, almost 20 years ago. But I still think this was interesting. In 2006, he had a $12 million penthouse in Manhattan, a $40 million mansion in Connecticut, which I think he still has, a $20 million vacation home, and a 47-foot yacht. Do you know what the name of the yacht is?
Something with money.
It is the Sexy Bitch.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, so a little bit of foreshadowing there, right?
I guess, yeah.
Vince has been noted at 1.1 billion, and that was back in 2001. Obviously, money goes up and down as far as how the stocks perform. In 2014, he was down to 750 million, but he He's
A
up
lot to
to
lose.
he's up to 3.6 billion nowadays, at least.
Wow, from 2014?
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense because the network really did boost them for a while. And then when did they last really boom? What happened when they last? Was it the network or was it when they sold the stuff to? What was that recent thing in the last 2 or 3 years that made them explode?
Well, they had the TV deal with Fox.
The TV deal with Fox, right? And then the Saudi Arabia money, right? We got to cover that as well.
Saudi Arabia money too, so that's like a big deal for investors.
And that is a huge like example of Vince in a nutshell is making a huge, amazing business deal, but doing it with what you can perceive to be the wrong people, right? Like that's kind of Vince in a nutshell, like that kind of business move where it's like you can say it's the best move for the company and it makes him a lot of money and how did he do that? But then look who he did it with. I mean that is a Vince McMahon move right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, man. I'm gonna say this. I don't think he's worth 3.6 billion anymore, because in 2018 the stock popped off at $96 a share, and so that was like the peak. That's like the highest the stock has ever been. Well, yeah, and now the stock is sitting at about 65, and it is on the way up though. So he might be back at 3 billion. But just a quick note on that. That was. They had a big upsurge in 2018 on their stock, which
I'm sure he sold off enough to hedge his bets.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Wow. Actually, I'm looking at the stock now. Like it really popped off in 18, and it looks like it's back on the way up. Impressively enough. So,
what happened in 18 was when they got the deal with Fox, huh?
It must be when they announced it. Which just. And like you said, Saudi Arabia too. They started doing that then. So just a lot of investor faith when you have a guaranteed contract for, that much money, and then, on both ends. So they'll probably be getting another big TV deal very soon here. So it doesn't need to even be said, but yes, he is a very wealthy man, a billionaire.
Does not have to worry about money for his lifetime, his children's lifetime, his grandkids.
Yeah.
Hey, maybe he'll actually be a grandfather. How about that?
Well, he is a actually perform his duties as a grandfather.
Yes,
I know.
Yes.
That's hard to think of, though. I feel like Vince really doesn't vibe with kids. I just that's. I bet you he's funny. I mean, he seems like a funny guy, but. I mean, he deals with grown men all day long, so it's hard to think of him, really making kids laugh and stuff. But maybe I'm totally wrong.
I bet you, yeah. Well, hopefully, whatever you want to say about him, he does something positive with himself.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I agree. Another thing is the Republican Party. McMahon and his wife have donated $1 million in 2014 to candidates, political action committees, Karl Rove, America Rising, like a conservative research and tracking group. They donated $5 million to Donald Trump's charity, $8 million in 2008 to give grants to a couple universities. Yeah, so right-leaning Republican guys that, he's done some good philanthropic stuff. That's kind of the vibe of the company nowadays, too. I know that Stephanie McMahon has compared philanthropy to a business move, saying that, it makes your brand look better, which kind of makes you question, the whole, why are you doing
intentions?
it? Yeah.
Yeah, well, that, and it... There's a big giant tax write-off as well. Let's not
huge
kid
tax
ourselves.
write-off. That's for damn sure. They've supported the Special Olympics for years.
Very nice.
Yeah,
sure.
which is cool.
Connor's Cure, stuff like that.
Yeah. So, getting into a little more dark stuff, and we'll mention this, and then we'll talk about some more funny stuff here. In '92, Rita Chatterton, who was a former referee, noted that, and she actually said this on Geraldo Rivera's show. She said that McMahon tried to get her to perform oral sex, and when she refused, that he raped her. A former wrestler corroborated this. I obviously don't know if it's true or not, but with the other allegations coming out, it's possible. So this is kind of the first '92 story that something weird is going on here.
Yeah, I mean, if you hear, some of the behavior that he has allegedly been up to, I mean, I guess this would fit the mold for it. So, of course,
And
that woman definitely deserves to be heard, and let's see if there's something there's probably, that none of us can say for sure if there's something to it, but I mean, it wouldn't be surprising, I guess I could put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and '92 was a whole different era too. I mean, so nowadays this girl would have a platform, but back in the day it was just really different.
It would have been literally he said, she said, and his word.
Yeah,
and his powerful, lawyers and everything against her.
And there is that power dynamic there, and that's one of the biggest parts of these sexual issues is the power dynamic. It's like, well, this person might not really want to do this with you, but since you're the one in power, they might feel inclined.
Can't say no.
Yeah, exactly.
They want to say no, but they can't say no. I mean,
yeah,
it's very difficult for people of power like that to, their intimidation of another person is something that they're oblivious to sometimes.
Yeah. In 2006, McMahon was accused of sexual harassment by, and we've heard this story, a worker at a tanning bar. The charge appeared to be wrong because McMahon was in Miami for the Royal Rumble, but it was clarified the alleged incident was reported to police on the day of the Rumble, but took place before the Rumble. So they announced that no charge would be filed. But I think this has another bit of evidence that kind of points in a direction.
Yeah, especially if the things just disappear after a while. I mean, it
True.
definitely could mean that some money was thrown at that problem.
Oh, yeah. So, then finally in April of this year, the WWE board began investigating a $3 million hush money settlement that McMahon paid over an affair with a former employee. The investigation revealed other NDAs related to misconduct by other women in the company and John Laurinaitis, who actually, I don't know if you knew this, but Triple H took John Laurinaitis' job.
That's what it seems like. Yeah.
For now.
But
There's going to be a power grab in the company for sure.
Is that a demotion for Triple H from what he did before?
I don't know. I feel like they're running around with their heads cut off, bro. Like, just trying to patch holes right now. So I'm sure he does a few things. Because recently I'd heard that he was, like, running NXT again. And so I just don't know anymore.
I think they're also running out of people that want those jobs, to be honest with you.
Oh, God. That's true. God. I just listened to... what's her name? The Australian girl that wrestles...
Tony Storm?
I listened to Tony Storm on Renee Paquette. It was actually not that good to listen to. It was actually getting annoying, but boy, oh boy, did she bury the fuck out of that place and the whole power structure and everything. Yeah, it was actually kind of annoying to listen to because she kept going on and on about it, and I'm just like, okay, we get it. You didn't like it.
Yeah, I don't know if it was because she wasn't given the right, spot and everything, but she didn't really impress me much there.
Yeah, so. I guess I can kind of agree with that, but
she's better in AEW, but in WWE I felt like I was like, I'm not really impressed with her overall thing, but I think it's gotten better since. But hey, it probably has a lot to do with that crap that she mentioned.
She did bring up that like she doesn't like the way they treat the wrestlers there, as in, and this all comes from Vince, but like the wrestlers like are treated like paramedics, like you're on call, and I don't know.
Yeah.
That made her uncomfortable. She was used to
Well,
being booked.
what's the like one of the common things you hear about that people say about Vince, whether they like him or not, is like he'll never ask you to do something that he wouldn't do himself.
I can see that.
And I think a lot of people have said that from like Jericho to Austin to whatever. But I just always think of that a few years ago when they had Rob Gronkowski for WrestleMania or whatever, and he did that jump off himself. And I mean that's just crazy for what 70 something at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've heard that pretty consistently. Like he would never ask you to do something that he wouldn't do himself. That's not always like the most yes, there's a lot of stuff that he would do that other people would do. That's fine.
Would he sign an NDA if he was sexually assaulted? I think that's
apparently
an
he
one.
would.
Yeah.
Maybe he has. We don't know. Probably he signed an NDA and gave himself money.
He probably did, man. That's probably happened. But as a result of all this, just a few days ago, or was it just yesterday? The news broke. Probably the biggest
yesterday.
The biggest news in
when you listen to this.
Yeah, the biggest news in WWE history except for probably obviously the incident with Benoit. He stepped down as CEO and chairman of WWE, and he retired. Actually, he retired.
Yeah, he retired.
So
that he doesn't say anything about creative. But apparently he's retiring, so...
He says he's retiring. We'll see. Now, this is where we get into some future speculation. We've talked about this, but Justin and I both are under the opinion that we're not sure if he's actually going to retire.
From what we hear about Vince, I'll
it's hard to
when
imagine.
I see it. Yeah. It's just not only hard to imagine someone that's been such an integral part of pro wrestling for so long, and someone that has never shown any signs of slowing down, other than maybe not appearing on camera as much, or someone that you hear about just being this non-stop tyrant of a, person that running that company. Every single thing has to go through him. For him all of a sudden just to come to a screeching halt.
It's crazy.
It's crazy, and I think... the fact that we started hearing these things come out and they took that title of CEO away, and you're like, well, I mean, okay, so he won't go on a couple investor phone calls,
Mm-hmm.
He's still, as long as he's in creative, Vince is running that company.
Well, and again, he owns most of the company still. So
Yeah,
unless he
he's
divests
still...
himself...
and moves to, the Florida Keys or the Bahamas and just lives his life out there.
As a hermit.
I just don't. I still don't believe he's not going to have anything to do with that company.
It's like some people grow up, Justin, and they have hobbies like you and me. We work our job. We do a lot of different stuff. We're into wrestling and all that stuff. Vince McMahon has done one singular thing.
Right.
He probably doesn't even have hobbies except working out.
And he's done it to the absolute maximum effort and dedication, whether that's good or bad for himself and his family. He knows nothing but this. So
yeah. So it is.
Hey, you hear about those people? They retire and then in a year or two they die. They're in perfect health. They retire. And then once they lose that purpose, or they just deteriorate, and that's it for them.
It's like as bad as losing a loved one.
Yeah,
you lose your purpose.
And I could see that. Unfortunately, I could probably see that happening to him. Hopefully,
Yeah, it's wild. It's really wild that this is going on. We're gonna figure all this out. Vince was a vital part in the production of these shows, along with someone named Kevin Sullivan.
No, man, Kevin Dunn, right?
Kevin Dunn. I'm getting all sorts of names mixed up.
It took a little while to get to his name, and of course he's one of those infamous guys in the company as well.
Which there's no pictures of him online. There's 2 pictures of him on the internet, by the way. Very private guy.
Enough for Jim Cornette to call him a beaver teeth or whatever.
Yeah. People that actually worked with him make fun of him. He has claimed that he will never work with anybody except Vince McMahon. So we'll see where that goes too. Honestly, I would fucking love to see the cameras not shake anymore. Wouldn't that be awesome?
Yeah, but that's a Kevin Dunn thing. So.
That's what I'm saying. That's why I hope
Yeah.
Vince is leaving. Maybe lets Kevin Dunn leave as well. So, production.
We'll see.
I've heard people say that there were changes on Friday night already. Did you hear about that?
No. What kind of changes?
They said the word wrestling in pro wrestling.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
They said that Michael Cole seemed a lot more relaxed.
That's right. You don't have them yelling in their ear.
Yeah.
That's one thing I might watch just to notice the commentary.
I've actually heard that, like, I've heard a few people say they think Michael Cole will become a much better commentator. Oh, no, I remember what they said. They didn't say WWE Universe. Michael Cole said the fans. He actually said the phrase the fans.
Mm-hmm.
So
He might be the one that feels the most relief out of anyone.
well, it's true. I mean, Vince is
No,
known for having
Michael-
yes men around, and Michael Cole is like an ultimate yes man to Vince.
I don't know. No, I've heard him kind of wise off to him, but I think that he's the one that has to do whatever he says, right? Because he's the one getting yelled at, and then he can't. You know what I mean?
Have you heard the story of when Pat McAfee wore shorts to WrestleMania? And, like, Michael Cole was like, you can't be wearing those. And he snitched on him to Vince.
And Vince
Like,
was fine with it, right?
Vince was like, oh, it looks cool.
Right. But I've heard, have you heard there's a famous clip of Michael Cole not agreeing with something with Vince, and then Vince just starts yelling at him. He's like, yes, sir. Okay.
That's what I was saying,
So there are
dude.
times where he wises off to him here and there. But no, I think you'll see him much more.
I have seen that video, by the way.
There's been times, yeah. And there was, remember from, what was it, 2015 when they did that Beast in the East show?
Mm-hmm.
In Japan with...
That was a good show.
And Michael Cole was great in commentary with that. Because he didn't have Vince yelling at him the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, imagine Michael Cole being his own boss in a way. Obviously he'll have a boss, but it'll be a little more like someone like Excalibur who just says what's off the top of his mind, and JR who is, that could be good or bad for Jim Ross. But
right.
we've heard Michael Cole do some good commentating, but his language is so rigid but that's a Vince thing, man.
I mean, he's got to be, at this point, Michael Cole as well, without the exception of maybe Kevin Dunn, maybe Triple H, maybe Stephanie, depending on when she started, but he's one of the longest tenured people in the company now.
Oh,
He was before.
Since he was
He's
a
gotta be in the top 5.
skinny little Michael Cole, probably younger than I am now.
Started in 97 or 98 there, so that puts him
and Kevin
pretty
Kelly
high up on that seniority totem pole. Kevin Kelly was he was there in 98 to 2000 or something like that, 2001.
Yeah.
Kevin.
Kind of a trip. I in my head I see Michael Cole in that long sleeve WWE shirt, like black shirt with like
jacket. Yeah.
Yeah. But there's already, like I said, some changes happening, and I'm sorry, it wasn't that they said wrestling, that they said fans, which they were not supposed to say that word. They're always supposed to say WWE Universe. And that's another Vince McMahonism, changing the language, right?
Yes.
There's no such thing as a hospital.
No, don't say belt. It's a title.
Belts
medical
hold up
facility,
your pants.
right?
Medical facility, sports entertainment, WWE Universe. So, pretty crazy stuff. Let's get into a few of the quirks of more funny stuff of Vince McMahon, and then we will let y'all go. Vince versus sneezing. What do you know about that?
Vince does not like when you sneeze or you show any signs of illness.
Yawning, I think, would be a bad one too.
Yawning, coughing,
yeah.
being hungry.
And he believes it is a lack of self-control. Which is funny because it's an involuntary thing, dude.
And if you're sick, you're just weak.
You're weak, yeah. Do you know Vince has sneezed? Did you know that?
He's had to if he's a human being.
And supposedly when he sneezes, he angrily mutters to himself and loses focus for a few minutes.
Sure.
It sounds like he's making the sneeze thing harder than it really is. I mean, I've also heard Vince talk about cheat days. He has this idea that, like, on a cheat day, you can eat whatever you want, and when you're working out and stuff, that the all that bad food will just, like, go right through your body, and you're totally fine. He's claimed that, you know, on his cheat day, he'll eat, like, a whole box of Oreos. And in his opinion, it just, like, your body doesn't absorb it or anything. He's so healthy that it all just gets exuded from his body. So, very interesting McMahonism there.
Well, he didn't know what a burrito was, I heard.
He didn't know what a burrito was.
Yeah, I heard that story where, like, you know, someone was, like, eating a burrito. He's like, what is that? It's a burrito. And I guess he literally eats that every day because he has, like, a steak wrap or whatever.
Oh, okay.
And he's like, someone's mentioned something about a burrito, and he's like, why don't you tell everyone what a burrito is?
Man,
you know,
that's part of the thing when you are doing that job for that long, and that's your whole life. Probably doesn't get out a whole lot. And, you know,
I've heard it mentioned before. Oh, you like comedy? We have Santino.
Who? Andrew Santino?
No, you know.
Oh, Santino Marella. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Vince once was driving on the same road as Court Bauer.
Right.
Did you hear this one?
Go ahead, tell it.
And he started racing Court Bauer. He boxed in Court to make Court Bauer head straight to a construction site.
Is that when Bauer was a rider?
Yeah. And Court Bauer had to slam on the brakes to avoid slamming into the construction site, and Vince sped off.
Laughing, probably.
Laughing that he almost killed someone.
What kind of car did Court Bauer have?
They probably had a nice one. He was making WWE money.
I guess.
Maybe he had, like, a Porsche or something like that, you know? Or maybe, like, a Mustang, a high-end Mustang. CM Punk tells a story when he, The Undertaker, JBL, Edge, and Vince all had to room together when they were doing Tribute to the Troops. So they got to room with Vince. And Punk couldn't sleep because everyone was snoring, right? Except for Vince, who would all night long fart and then laugh. Yeah. So
I never heard. Where did he tell that story?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure where he told it, but this is all from that great Twitter thread, Stories of Vince McMahon. And this is something, I'm going to say this, man. Vince has done some fucked up stuff. I've heard Jericho say this, is that he is like, he's a lad deep down. He's one of the boys deep down. And I could kind of see that. Yeah, I could kind of see that because if you see him interacting with some wrestlers, you hear some pretty funny stuff, and he's just acting like one of the guys. And I definitely think, you know, this probably doesn't apply to the women too, unless they're one of the guys as well, like maybe Lita might have been. But he seems like wants to be one of the guys. What did I hear? Oh, I thought I heard something else that was kind of funny about that. But you seen that one where Seth Rollins goes backstage and you know, claps, you know, hugs Vince McMahon, and they're saying stuff like, oh, Vince says something like, oh, you need to fucking do this, and then Seth says, no, you need to fucking, something like that, you know, and they're just fucking with each other, and it was actually pretty funny. Here's another good one. Jim Cornette was at Vince's house, and Vince had somebody from the cable company working on the TV because the sound was broken. The cable guy came up to Vince and explained to him what a mute button was and that the mute was on. Vince gave him $100 tip.
I can see that too.
Yeah. Almost like that really smart dude who's really just lacking common sense in a way.
Or just misses the outside, you know. It's like someone that's been in jail for a long time and they come out and then they have cell phones.
Yeah.
He's so like locked in with his company that he knows no other things.
Knows no other things. Maybe he'll sit around watching wrestling, man. He can catch up on some AEW now, right?
Yeah, we'll see.
Shit. Does this mean that he is for hire as a performer?
Of course, you can probably DM him to book him.
Yeah, is he going to be bookings at, Vince at hotmail.com?
Oh, absolutely.
He's going to be doing signings at the Colorado Springs Comic Con.
Yeah, he'll be at Frank and Sons out here. He'll go to the Wrestling Guy store.
Hell yeah, man.
He'll be at the local comic shop.
He'll be
at Comic-Con.
Be doing the indie circuit, doing signings. So
we'll see him sitting ringside at PWG.
Or GCW. He'll be one of the fans, chanting along with them. So,
the possibilities are endless.
Vince has talked a lot of shit about UFC. Did you know that?
Not really. I haven't really heard.
Yeah,
but I'm not surprised, I guess.
He would make the claims that, those fighters are all going to have brain damage in a year and stuff like that,
Well, everyone's going to have brain damage, but yeah, that's probably true.
Did you know he was at the recent UFC show? Not today's, but
no, he
last
was.
month's?
He was sitting with Triple H, Stephanie, and Nick Khan, I believe.
Yeah, so...
While Jim Ross and Tony Khan were adjacent.
Really?
Yeah, they were all there at the same thing in Vegas.
Wow. Well, look to our listeners. We're talking lightly, and we're talking. Is that a Dr. Pepper? That looks pretty good.
It was.
We're talking lightly about a lot of this stuff. Justin and I take these allegations very seriously, and I'm sure we have our own opinions on what Vince should have done. And but right now we talked about what he did, his life, who he was, who he is, and what it's going to become. And I think that's a fascinating story, Justin, of who he's going to become. Is he going to be this Antonio Inoki type guy now who just rarely ever shows his face? It's all very interesting. But whether you like him or not, like I've said before, one of the most important people, if not the most important people in the wrestling business, the brains, and at least the person who approved the brains and hired the brains behind multiple big, huge booms and the creation of multiple mainstream stars in the business. Really, there will be no other person like Vince McMahon. He is one of a kind. Do you have any final thoughts on Vince?
I think we started with it polarizing. The biggest moments, the most, pivotal moments, the most down moments, the most violent moments. Vince has been pretty much has been in the equation of all of those. Even up to this, he's had scandals, he's had triumphs. I mean, you can't really think of anyone in any profession that has been such a part of everything. I mean,
yeah.
When you think of the film industry, when you think of baseball, when you think of, whether it's another sport.
Vince McMahon has been part of the film industry too.
Yeah, you won't find one person solely identified with one. I mean, we could talk about Babe Ruth with baseball, but that wasn't 40-year span of him, being on. Obviously his legacy lives on forever, but it would be like, imagine if Babe Ruth was a player. He owned the Yankees. Mm-hmm. He also owned 5 other teams, and he had anything to do with baseball.
And he helped create the next legendary players, and it's hard to even compare. Wrestling's a unique business in itself, and it's hard to compare to others, and so it's hard to compare.
It would be like if Elon Musk ran the entire car industry,
Yeah, and owned 95% of the shares, or 95% of the market share. 99% of the market share.
I don't think the world allows for another person to. Well, I mean, you got your Jeff Bezos and all that stuff, but I mean, for someone to, it's just he grew it himself, and then he's been through that. Like, yeah, it's just polarizing. Yeah, I mean, that's really the only way to end it. I'm gonna drone on too much if I go any further, but that's what it is.
The key word is polarizing. So we got Okada and Tonga and Finley versus looks like Jay, Juice, and Ghetto. So it's time to go watch some of this.
Yeah, we're a little bit ways away from Yujiro, and let's see, we'll say the format. Well, it doesn't matter because people are going to be listening to this afterwards. But
I just know that we got is it Naito Tanahashi tonight?
That's the main, yeah.
That should be awesome. So
yeah, I'll probably watch a little bit now and then pick up the rest in the morning.
Cool.
No shame in that, right?
No shame in that, guys. This has been Wrestling and Vince McMahon. Thank you to you had a guy comment on our post.
Oh, I saw that.
What was his name? Do you remember his name?
Let's hold on. We should have brought that up at the beginning of the show. We got 2 follows. I'm on here now. 2 more follows.
Yeah. Well,
somebody said, "Oh, Luchador Comics. Luchador _comics."
Yes. Thank you. We really appreciate that. We really enjoy the engagement, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So I love hearing that from Luchador Comics. Thank you.
Love it. Keep up the great work. We appreciate that.
And then the other comment was just a marketing person.
Yeah, DM us at vintage.records. All they needed was my social, and apparently we're on our way after that.
Oh my God. All they need is my social and some other, my credit card information, and we're gonna get this. Do you get messages like that a lot?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Boost your followers, that kind of thing.
I would only trust it if it was like if I was a super hot chick, because then people are like, be a model. But anyways, that's neither here nor there. Justin, thank you for doing this show with me. You guys, all listeners, thank you. We actually went 2 hours and 18 minutes. Vince McMahon, he had a long life. So yeah, we will see you guys later.
Good night.